Neil just talked a few minutes ago about the kind of the social dimension to devolution. Well, I got a bit grumpy earlier this summer when, in his budget, the Chancellor stole one of our phrases and added a word to it. We've talked about the living wage for a while, and he calls it the national living wage, which I don't think is what most of us understand a living wage to be. So I pinched one of his terms and added a word to that. We're not simply a northern powerhouse. We need to be a northern cultural powerhouse. Culture is at the heart of all that we are and what we do. From the Peterloo Massacre through to the Rochdale Pioneers, the suffragette movement, the work of the churches and other religious communities within their areas in the Manchester area. I think for 200 years there's a strong story of this part of the world, this part of the country, that is about solidarity in diversity. It's about the way in which different groups have come and made their home in and around Manchester and been accepted, allowed to play their part, to contribute their particular gifts, their skills, their expertise. I live in Salford. I live at the heart of largely an Orthodox Jewish community, a community that came here and has played its part in making Manchester the area that Manchester is today. So yes, a northern powerhouse, but let's not forget the cultural dimension of that. Let's not reduce it simply to an economic argument. Let's celebrate the culture that we have here, because that is where we've drawn on again and again in 2 centuries and more to energise ourselves and to grow and to develop. The second thing is about moving the political consensus. I guess if I got a bit fed up with the Chancellor pinching our phrase, I think my lowest point of the summer was, I try not to be part of political, so I'll hit the Labour Party now. I think it was when Harriet Harman said, well, we're not going to oppose child tax credits because we've lost an election and clearly people want them. Well, actually, the task of political parties, political organisations, isn't simply to find where the political consensus is at the moment and run for it. The task of a political organisation is to move and define the political consensus. And so I think an important part of the challenge for us in tackling inequality in an area like Manchester is to move the political consensus on, to unmask the lies, to challenge the prejudices, to expose the hatred that's there. And we do that in 3 ways. We do that by finding the figures. I'm in a bit of a dispute on Twitter at the moment. I tweeted about 2 weeks ago a story from The Guardian had said how many people die just after having been declared fit for work by the DWP. And I worked out that's about 50% more than the number of people who die of being murdered in the UK. And lots of people tweeted that on, and some people not very happy. Finding figures. Figures get you so far, but I wrote an article about migration for the Observer back in April that made all the points that are now being made in the last 5 days, but got very little traction at the time because actually there wasn't the emblematic picture, and the picture of the poor little lad last week, his body on the beach, his story humanise what otherwise gets lost in the figures. And yeah, you know, I've got a degree in maths and statistics. I love the numbers, but actually we've got to find the stories that turn those numbers into reality that people can grasp. And then, of course, we have to build alliances. We're just talking on the platform a few minutes ago about, in response to the migrant refugee crisis. Actually, there's a lot of stuff now going on, bubbling up in a kind of fairly atomised way across different parts of Greater Manchester. How do we bring that together so we're not all, again, doing the same thing, but we're complementing and supporting each other in what we're doing? And particularly in that task of moving the political consensus. Don't just accept what we've been given and rush for it. Let's be the people who define the political consensus. And yes, public academics, as Neil mentioned, and others, we all have a part to play. One of my areas of interest is climate change. My daughter's a Greenpeace activist, one of their team who climbs up high buildings and unfurls banners from the top, and I'm awfully proud of her. And I've learned from the world of climate change there's 2 things that you have to be thinking about all the time. There's adaptation and mitigation. Adaptation, how do we live in a world that's 2 or 3 degrees centigrade higher than temperature than it is at the moment? Mitigation, how do we stop it being 4, 5 or 6 degrees higher than it is at the moment? And any comprehensive strategy responding to climate change looks both at adaptation and mitigation. So I wonder what that looks like in terms of tackling inequality. Mitigation, for me, is always where you want to start. It's what you want to aim at. But in the meantime, until we've got mitigated the impact, we've got to adapt to the world as it is. So mitigation, you referred to living wage, absolutely crucial. And it has to be a real living wage, not something the Chancellor declares to be a living wage. The way in which we integrate healthcare, which is very much a part, I think, of the devolution agreement for the Greater Manchester area. Too often, I think our healthcare is skewed towards spending lots of money, disproportionate money, on the things that are most likely to impact badly on the health of the most wealthy. I suspect we do not spend a proportionate amount of money on the things that are actually damaging the health of the poorer sectors of our society. How can we integrate healthcare in a way that actually reduces inequality? Because at the moment, I suspect health inequality is simply built onto every other inequality. Yes, welfare campaigns. Social housing. I'm on the board of the Wythenshawe Community Housing Group. We're concerned to see how social housing can remain a force that reduces inequality in our society, not one that simply exacerbates it. And really good public transport. Public transport is a good way to reduce inequalities in society, making it cheap, readily available, not just at particular convenient times of day. Some of the places I visit, very difficult for poorer people to work there because the transport links are not very good outside of certain hours of the day. So mitigation, reducing the levels of inequality in our society are absolutely core. But in the meantime, we mustn't forget a certain amount of adaptation. How do we allow people to live within a society and survive in a society with great inequalities? Every church I visit now, and pretty well every other religious organisation, is some way bought into the food bank system. They were hardly heard of 5 or 6 years ago. I regret they have to be there, but they are doing a job at the moment. Often on the back of those food banks, which are a good gateway organisation, people come for a food parcel, but they go with much more. Advocacy work, enabling people to get what is rightly theirs, challenging wrong decisions that are made that result in benefit claims being rejected or sanctioned. Things like breakfast clubs. Again, many organisations, voluntary organisations, have been involved this summer, probably the second summer it's happened on any scale, in trying to ensure that the kids who've gone back to school this week and last week haven't gone back having lost weight from the weight they left at the end of last term. Breakfast clubs, lunch clubs, ways of ensuring that our children continue to thrive, despite the fact that paying for that extra 5 meals a week is too much for some of our families across Greater Manchester. Credit unions, creating affordable means of finance. Again, the Archbishop of Canterbury and my own organisation have been very much at the fore, and we as a diocese have produced YouTube material and other stuff advocating the formation and support of our credit unions. And of course, fuel tariffs. Why is it that the poorest people pay the most for their fuel in this country? Finding a more equitable way of distributing the costs of fuel so that I'm not subsidised by people who can't afford to pay as much as I can. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.